I'm going to be speaking to the co-chairs of the British Columbia Net Zero Business Solutions Roundtable, which recently published a white paper offering insights into how business and government can collaborate to position the province to reduce emissions, attract investment, and compete as the world transitions to a net zero economy. So I'd like to welcome Julia Balabanowicz. She's an executive with Innergex Renewable Energy, and Suzanne Goldberg, who's an executive with ChargePoint Canada. So welcome to the interview.
Thank you very much for inviting us.
Thanks for having us.
Well, Suzanne, let's start with you. Can you give us an overview of the white paper, please?
Yeah, for sure. And thanks for having us on. The idea of this white paper was really from conversations that Julia and I were having with some other businesses in BC who are providing net zero solutions. And what we realized is, we all had a number of commonalities. The kind of at that high level, the commonality was we were all businesses offering products or services that contribute to our net zero future or offer net zero solutions. And we were all, aligned with the BC government's goals for Clean BC and net zero. But in these conversations, we realized that there were a common set of challenges that we had as businesses, and also a common set of solutions or principles that we thought that could really help accelerate and align BC's economic objectives with their environmental objectives, both in the short term and out to 2050 with net zero. And all of this came together in our white paper, where we offer 8 key principles for how the BC government can do exactly that, align their economic objectives with their environmental objectives. And the last thing I'll say on this is that BC has a really timely opportunity to make those linkages. There are over 136 governments globally representing 90% of GDP that have committed to net zero emissions. And so this, according to Mark Carney, who is a former governor of both the banks of Canada and England, this is the greatest commercial opportunity of our age, and BC has a really important opportunity here to grow jobs and remain competitive from an innovation and economic perspective.
Now, Julia, this question's for you. The first principle is integrating net zero across government. You want government to act nimbly and with urgency to achieve net zero in BC. And I have to tell you, as a BC resident myself, and I get the BC government's press releases and interview some of these folks, there's more urgency here than, say, in Alberta or Ontario. But I wouldn't say that there's a real sense of urgency in BC.
Right. And so that principle is really kind of the first foundational one that all of the other principles have a relation to. And when you look across our principles, you can see that a lot. And ultimately, it comes down to this idea that, we hear all the time that climate change and solutions to climate change, our path to net zero is we'll take a whole of government approach. And that includes all the ministries as well as government agencies and crown corporations. So really this principle is that reminder, but also the recognition that it's hard to do. It's a challenge. Our government and structures aren't necessarily set up to take on such wicked problems, but it doesn't mean that we're not able to do it.
Now, Suzanne, the next question for you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And I want to talk about strengthening local markets for net zero solutions, because one of the strategies, the pathways I've seen proposed for encouraging the development of businesses and technologies is local government procurement, for example. Is that kind of what you had in mind?
Yeah, I think that's definitely one element to this. When we came up with this principle, we were thinking a little more globally. So things we heard from some of the folks in the roundtable was that, BC has been a wonderful place for them to develop innovation for R&D. And we have a large range of companies that are either based in BC or operating in BC, but they are, let's just take businesses that have developed technology solutions in BC, a large portion of their market is outside of BC. And for companies like ChargePoint, our markets are global, but really what we're looking at is how do we create a marketplace in BC to create demand for net zero solar solution services and products. So really, BC has really ambitious but achievable goals, as Julia said, and the solutions to those are going to be technological and solutions oriented. But we really need to create the investment environment so businesses come here, so businesses and consumers are investing in the solutions, and we're really creating kind of a robust and diverse economy for the next economic revolution, which is one that is net zero.
Now, Julia, the next principle is one that I'm very curious to hear your point of view on, because of course you're an executive with an independent power producer. And this one is to use government and utility investment to crowd in rather than crowd out private investment. What's your take on that?
Absolutely. Yeah, this one is very close to my heart and the work I do. And ultimately, the path to net zero, electricity is the backbone of that. Being able to electrify and being able to electrify with clean renewable energy is what is going to get us there. And there are a lot of steps to get there and a lot of steps to achieve that energy transition. But ultimately, what we know is it's going to take a significant investment in our electricity system. And that's from the wires to the generation. And in order to do that, it's important that we do it quickly with expertise that knows how to work with the various technologies that can provide renewable electricity, and as well in a way that's the most cost effective to ratepayers. So as we figure that puzzle out, it's really important that the government and utilities remain open to working with private investors who can bring that to the table. And we have brought that to the table in British Columbia in the past with our investments that we continue to operate here, and we continue to make those investments in other jurisdictions. So we're looking to have that conversation more regularly and more openly with government and the utilities around what investments are going to be needed and who is best placed to make those investments in order to achieve the multiple objectives we need to. So I'll leave it at that. I could talk about it all day.
Appreciate the brevity of your answer. Now, Suzanne, the seventh principle is contribute to building a net zero innovation ecosystem. And I just had an interview yesterday with someone in Alberta about their innovation ecosystem. It grew up around the oil and gas industry. It's very robust. It has some fairly significant capital or investment from governments in it. And I know there's something, there's lots of innovation in BC, but is it enough? Is the ecosystem to support that innovation robust enough?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, I think we should celebrate successes. There's been a lot of success with funding and programs, even on the electric vehicle side with funding for new technologies to support commercial vehicles and other types of electric mobility, clean energy funds and R&D. So there's been a lot, and BC has a great foundation. And this, also comes back with creating a market, not just for, innovation at the R&D initial stage, but innovation at later stages of the market, and also creating demand for that. So, as Julie had mentioned, everything is quite connected. I think continued innovation comes in kind of maybe 2 or 3 buckets. The first is supporting R&D, then taking that to commercialization, then taking that to creating local demand. So, one thing we mentioned is, leveraging the power of public sector procurement. One example of that could be, mandatory net zero or GHG lens from which public procurement decisions are made, and both from kind of a government public sector to crown corporations. And then also taking that in terms of, raising the level of and profile of the innovative sector in BC. And this is a little tangential to that key principle, but one of the core objectives of us writing the white paper and coming together as a roundtable group was really to raise the visibility of this emerging net zero sector, these businesses that are quite diverse, but all contributing to what we need to see in terms of reducing emissions across the economy.
Now, Julia, the last principle is supporting Indigenous participation in the net zero future. And I think in terms of power production, electricity production, like your company is involved in, and there's been some talk in BC about keeping, private utilities out of that and but the First Nations have responded by saying, hey, we want to partner with private companies because they bring capital, they bring expertise, they bring things that our community doesn't have that we need to do these kind of projects. Is that what you had in mind?
Absolutely, from an electricity perspective. I mean, I should note that one of the really unique things about this white paper is that we have such a diversity of companies that if you talk to any one of us who contributed, we would interpret this one from different lenses. But from electricity perspective, absolutely. That's a core part of Innergex's business model. But I should probably start by answering that question with pointing to the very important DRIPA legislation that we have here in British Columbia now. That's the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People Act and the corresponding action plan that the government currently has in draft form. And that action plan does recognize that they need to work with Indigenous communities across British Columbia to identify how they want to participate in the clean energy future here. So I do want to applaud government for that and encourage them to continue down that path in defining that, because it is an incredible opportunity for not only reaching net zero, but also reconciliation goals and ensuring that we're respecting land and title rights here in British Columbia.
Well, Suzanne and Julia, thank you very much for this. Really appreciate your insights, and good luck with getting your principles adopted by the government.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciated the opportunity to speak with you today.